Hello everyone, I'm Nizzahon for the Aether Hub, and today all of Amonkhet was spoiled. This is always a fun time of year for me because I love Limited and I love thinking about and evaluating cards for new formats. Commons and uncommons are the most important cards in draft because you will see more of them than anything else. In this video I'll talk about the best commons and uncommons in each color for Limited. If you want some more in-depth analysis, you can head over to my channel where I'll be doing a full set Limited review this week with a new colors review put up every day. Now let's get started by looking at the best white commons. My pick for the third best common is Takrop Elite. 4 mana for a 2/2 flyer isn't the best rate, but Takrop Elite is a creature with a very powerful exert ability. It gives an Anthem effect to your whole team, including itself. And that's a pretty good boost to have. This format has a lot of ways to go wide, it has creature tokens, and it's pretty great to be able to pump your whole team. Additionally, Takrop Elite is nice because it has an evasive ability in flying, so that up until the point where you want to use its exert ability, you can just be attacking for 2 in the air, and that's a very reasonable thing to be doing. The next best white common is Fanbearer, and this one I think is actually going to be worth a fairly high pick, while Takrop Elite is probably more of a middle of the pack kind of card, but Fanbearer is 1 white mana for a 1/2, and it has the Master Decoy ability. It's sort of the Master Decoy of this set. For 2 generic mana, it lets you tap a creature. This is quite a powerful ability because it makes the card relevant for the entire course of the game, either tapping down your opponent's best attacker or best blocker, depending on who's ahead basically on the board, and both of those are very powerful things to be doing. The best common in the set for white, though, is Compulsory Rest, who is the pacifism of the set. We have our pacifism and our Master Decoy, sort of repetitive in a limited format that these are 2 of our best commons, but that's where we are. Compulsory Rest makes it so a creature can't attack or block, just like pacifism. It's not quite as good as pacifism, though, because it gives your opponent the option to pay 2 generic mana and sacrifice the creature to gain 2 life. Still, this is a very strong removal spell, even if it's not quite pacifism. It is pretty mediocre against creatures who have Embalm, and that I think is what they were going for in the design here, but it's a very powerful removal spell nonetheless. It can be used to shut down a lot of creatures in the format for a very efficient cost. And those are the 3 best white commons. I would be willing to first pick Compulsory Rest and Fanbearer in a lot of packs. Takrop Elite, not so much, but it is a card I'd be thrilled to have in basically any white deck. Now, the best white uncommons are, I think at number 3, we have Trueheart Duelist, who is a very good 2-drop, a 2 mana 2/2 who can block an additional creature each combat. Means that it's another card that's relevant at basically all stages of the game. In the early game, it can just get in for some damage. In the late game, it can be a creature who buys you time by blocking 2 5/5s or something like that, or by blocking 2 3/1s or something. It kills 2 creatures and gets you a 2-for-1. Plus, it has Embalm, so that itself is a 2-for-1 because you get it to bring it back. And remember, creatures that have Embalm come back as an exact copy of themselves, so that includes the additional creature each combat blocking ability that Trueheart Duelist has. I wouldn't take Trueheart Duelist super early, but I wouldn't hate to take him around pick 5 or 6. The next best white uncommon, I think, is Vizier of Deferment. For 2 colorless and 1 white, you get a 2/2 who lets you blink something. It does have sort of a restrictive amount of blinking that it can do, in that it can only exile creatures that attacked or blocked, but you can do a lot of things with that ability. Plus, this has flash. The fact it has flash is what makes it really flexible. You can use it to dodge removal spells if your opponent's casting one during combat or after combat. You can use it to make your opponent blank one of their combat tricks by exiling the creature they target it with, because they're going to be doing that during combat. You can just use it to keep a big creature from attacking you for a turn. You can use it to make it so a creature you block with survives for a turn. You can use it to abuse and enter the battlefield ability. These are all things it can do, and none of them are really magical Christmas land. There's going to be board states where this becomes relevant, and Vizier of Deferment is a very, very good card, and I would consider first picking it in a weaker pack. However, the best white uncommon is the best by far, and that is Cast Out, which is a removal spell, a 4-mana removal spell that can exile any non-land permanent, and that is very powerful. On top of that, it has Flash, and that's what really pushes it into the number 1 spot here, because you can actually cast this Oblivion Ring type effect during your opponent's turn to really wreck them and get a 2-for-1, say if they're casting a combat trick or something like that. It also has Cycling, which you should almost never do unless you're like stuck on 1 or 2 lands for some reason. It's going to hurt to do it, so normally I would advise against it, but occasionally I guess having Cycling gives it a slight bit more flexibility. But all 3 of these uncommons are very strong, Cast Out and Vizier of Deferment especially. Now let's move on to the best blue commons. I think the third best blue common is Cartouche of Knowledge. I'm not usually a huge fan of auras, but I like basically all the cartouches. I think they're all playable. They're not all going to make the list of best commons, but Cartouche of Knowledge does. This is because Cartouche of Knowledge replaces itself, which mitigates against getting a 2-for-1, which is what a lot of auras end up making you do to yourself. It lets you draw a card, so it replaces itself, and the bonus it gives isn't irrelevant. +1/+1 and flying is a great bonus to add to a creature, especially a large ground creature, and Cartouche of Knowledge is a solid common because of it. I would take it around the middle of a pack and be pretty happy with it, but don't really want to take it super early. The next best blue common is Winds of Rebuke, which for 1 colorless and 1 blue lets you return a non-land permanent to its owner's hand, and it makes each player put the top 2 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. This, you know, is a bounce spell with sort of mixed. It's not clear whether it's all upside. It's not going to be clear whether it's all upside or all downside until you see what cards get milled. But the idea here is that you and your opponent could both have cards that do things out of your graveyard, whether through embalming or with aftermath. And so Winds of Rebuke will put things in the graveyard, and that's something to keep in mind. It's also worth noting there are several cards in the set, especially in the blue-red color pair, that care about how many instants and sorceries are in your graveyard, and Winds of Rebuke can stock your graveyard for that. But where it really gets value is just being a two-mana bounce spell at instant speed that can bounce any non-land permanent. That's a great way to interact with your opponent, a great tempo play. Not a card, again, that I would first pick, but I would take it relatively early, maybe around pick 6 or 7, and feel good about it. Next, we have Illusory Wrappings, which is blue's blue always gets sort of shafted on the removal spell department, and it did here too, since Illusory Wrappings is the best it got. It makes an enchanted creature have base power of 0/2, which is nice, but it's not great because you don't shut off activated abilities, you don't make it so the creature can't block, etc. It doesn't completely get rid of the creature in the way other colors are able to do, and Illusory Wrappings is sort of a subpar removal spell, but it's sadly the best that blue has. And I also wouldn't take it early. I don't think it's actually that much better than Winds of Rebuke. They're comparable cards. I like Illusory Wrappings a little more because it can shut down a creature permanently, at least somewhat permanently. It's still a 0/2 and it's still there, but it's not a big scary creature anymore. Now let's look at blue's uncommons. I think the third best blue uncommon is Lay Claim. May cost 7 mana, but Mind Control is always an amazing card, and this is even better than that because it can steal permanents. You can steal a Planeswalker with this, which is probably the dream. Not going to come up often, but it does come up sometimes. And stealing a permanent, the way to look at a card that steals cards is to think of it as a removal spell that says destroy target creature and put a copy of it into play. And that's a very powerful effect, and that's basically what Lay Claim does, except it can also do it with planeswalkers and artifacts, I guess, if you want them, even lands. And Lay Claim has an extra layer of power to it because it also has cycling, and there are tons of blue cards that like it when you cycle, and Lay Claim is one of those that, and you have flexibility with it. In the early game, you can decide to cycle it to make some cycle triggers go off and to maybe draw a card that you need, and in the late game, it's just a huge bomb that can just win you the game. And Lay Claim, I think, is worth thinking about first picking. I think it's that strong, and I would consider first picking it. Next, we have Vizier of Tumbling Sands, speaking of cycling. This is a 1/3 for 3, which isn't so great, but it has a powerful ability. It can untap another target permanent. What this means is this can be a blue ramp spell, which blue doesn't ever get. You can use this to untap your lands and ramp into a 5-drop the next turn. You can also use it to untap any other permanent, a creature or whatever, and on top of that, it has a cycling ability. For 1 and a blue, you can cycle it and draw your card, but when you cycle it, it still does something. It lets you untap a permanent. Sort of a mediocre combat trick, but at least it replaces itself. And again, cycling is something pushed pretty hard in blue, and that's something that Vizier of Tumbling Sands is happy about. And again, Vizier of Tumbling Sands, like Lay Claim, obviously since I have Vizier of Tumbling Sands over it, is a card I would think about first picking. However, the best blue uncommon is Angler Drake, I think by far. Some of this may be related to my own play style. I love mana war effects, I love bouncing creatures, and Angler Drake does that while also providing you with a massive sized body, a 4/4 flyer. And that is sometimes just going to be game breaking. You bounce, you just get such a huge tempo swing because of that. And Angler Drake is a card I would first pick in a lot of packs. I think it's going to be a mythic uncommon in this set. In other words, an uncommon that you don't see basically unless you're opening it. So all 3 of these blue uncommons are very powerful, which is nice because the 3 blue commons we looked at, none of them were very exciting at all. Now let's move to the best black commons. The third best black common is Splendid Agony. This would be a decent removal spell in any format. 3 mana to let's say, give a creature -2/-2. But it's even better than that because it allows you to distribute 2 -1/-1 counters among 1 or 2 target creatures. This means you can sometimes get 2-for-1s against X1s. This means that you don't even necessarily have to kill the creature if you don't want to. You can just shrink a creature so your creature can block it more effectively. So it does a lot more than it looks like it does. And it helps that this set is loaded with -1/-1 counter synergies, and so because of that, Splendid Agony gets an additional power boost. I wouldn't want to take it super early. I don't think it's quite premium removal, but it is quality removal, and I would take it around pick 5 or 6. Next, we have a card that I swear is supposed to reference the Rock's character in the second Mummy movie, Soul Stinger, who's a scorpion demon. There's a weird creature type for you. And this card is pretty awesome, and I like the design on it a lot. For 4 mana, you get a 4/5. Well, that's pretty good. It comes into play with 2 -1/-1 counters on it, which shrinks it down to a 2/3 though, and that's not as good. It doesn't necessarily come into play with those counters. You can put them somewhere else if you just want a 4/5. All of these creatures that come into play with -1/-1 counters have a lot of flexibility, including this Soul Stinger. You can decide to put it on one of your smaller creatures to kill it, so you just have a 4/5. But Soul Stinger does something extra, which is the reason why I think you want to put the counters on it a lot of the time. So you want to play your 4 mana 2/3 and put the counters on him. And that's because when he dies, you can put a -1/-1 counter on it for each -1/-1 counter on Soul Stinger. This can create horrible board situations for your opponent. Say they want to be attacking with a 2/3 or with a 2/3 or a 3/3 or a 2/2. Now they're looking at a Soul Stinger who can get a 2-for-1 because it can block and kill the creature and then put 2 counters on something else. And that's a pretty powerful effect. I like Soul Stinger, still not a card I want to take super early. I would take it, though, relatively early in a pack, but not a first pickable card or anything. Next, we have Final Reward, which is kind of clunky as a 5 mana spell, but it is an instant at least. Sometimes black gets like a high-costed removal spell that is not an instant, and it's a sorcery, and that kind of is obnoxious. But Final Reward is an instant, so you can interact on your opponent's turn, during combat, whatever, and it exiles the creature, which is relevant. This format is filled with embalmed creatures, and if you can just get rid of them altogether, you're going to feel good about that. And Final Reward is a card that I think is close to being a first pickable card, and in a weak pack probably is. I don't think it's super premium removal, though, because of how much it costs. But it's still, a card that kills any creature is something that you're going to want, and you'll play 2 to 3 of these in any black deck. Now let's look at the best black uncommons. I think the third best black uncommon is Gravedigger, which for 3 and a black is a 2/2. We've seen this card a lot, and usually it's been a common, and usually it's the best black common. Now it's an uncommon, and it's not quite the best black uncommon, as you can see. For 3 and a black, you get a 2/2, as I said, but it returns a creature card from your graveyard to your hand, and that is a huge effect. It basically amounts to a 2-for-1 a lot of the time with Gravedigger. You can trade your Gravedigger for a 2 toughness creature, and then you get some creature back, and you can cast it, and that's a great effect to have. There's lots of good creatures to get back from graveyards with Enter the Battlefield abilities in this set as well. I think the next best black uncommon is Stir the Sands, which you can view as sort of a split card because it's another card with cycling that does something when you cycle it. 6 mana to put 3 2/2 black zombie creature tokens into play is very nice. That's something you're very happy to do. It's good at any stage of the game. It's good whether you're ahead, whether you're behind, or whatever. But additionally, in addition to having that sort of sorcery speed option, for 3 and a black, you can cycle it and put a 2/2 zombie creature token into play at instant speed. So it's an instant sort of on its cycling half. And having these 2 options is great. As I've already mentioned, cycling is pushed pretty hard, especially in the blue-black color pair, and that's great for Stir the Sands. A 2/2 who draws you a card for 4, which is not an instant, is usually a playable card, but this, being able to flash a 2/2 into play and block their 2/2, for example, and draw a card off of it, is great. Both modes on this card are great. It's a card I like a lot. It's a card I think is first pickable. As is Bone Picker, who you can see here, who's pretty crazy. I think may even have potential in Constructed, because it's 1 black mana for a 3/2 flying Death Touch if a creature has died on the turn that you're playing it, which means your turn because it doesn't have flash. But it's not that hard to manufacture situations where creatures die. There's sacrifice synergies in this set. You can just attack into something. And the fail case for this card is that you play a 4 mana 3/2 with flying and Death Touch, and that's still a pretty good card. It can trade with anything. It can attack well. You're pretty happy with it. So Bone Picker, another first pickable uncommon, I would be happy with. Stir the Sands or Bone Picker as first picks in Amonkhet draft. Now let's move to the best red commons. So the third best red common, I think I have another Cartouche, which is Cartouche of Zeile. This thing does a lot for 1 mana. It doesn't mitigate against getting 2-for-1 quite as well as some of the other Cartouches do, but Cartouche of Zeile is just a lot, like I said, for 1 mana. You give a creature +1/+1 and haste for 1 mana, which is already sort of borderline playable card because basically you're paying 1 more mana to give your creature haste. and +1/+1 that you just played, and that's pretty good. But it also makes it so a creature can't block, and that is a very powerful set of words. Making creatures unable to block, especially in aggro decks, can sort of just open the floodgates on your opponent. Their best blocker can no longer block. Suddenly, their whole plan of how to defend themselves is gone, and you're suddenly attacking with your whole board. And Cartouche of Zeile, for 1 red mana, can open up situations like that. And because of that, I like it as the 3rd best red common. Wouldn't take it early, but I'd be happy to play it in any aggressive red deck, at least. At the 2nd best red uncommon slot, I have Electrify, which, again, red, we're talking sort of about how there's some repetitive things in limited formats. There's always like a 4 mana burn spell for red or a 5 mana burn spell for red, and that's what we have here is Electrify. It's a solid card. It's even going to be first pickable in a weak pack. Does 4 damage to a creature at instant speed that kills a lot of things in this format. Boring to talk about, but that's what it does, and it's a solid card, and more than solid. I would take it with the first pick, as I said. I think the best red common, though, is Magma Spray, which we've seen before, and it's back again, and it was great last time. 1 mana to do 2 damage is always very, very efficient, allows you to trade up almost all the time, and this thing has some nice extra synergy in this format. It exiles creatures, so if it kills something with Embalm, you don't have to worry about it coming back. I would be happy first picking Magma Spray or Electrify in a lot of packs, and so that's, red has 2 commons I'm happy to first pick, and that is saying something. Next, let's look at the best red uncommons. The 3rd best one, I think, is On-Crop Crasher, and I just mentioned how powerful the words target creature can't block are, and On-Crop Crasher is another example of that. So 3 mana 3/2 with haste, which is already a very playable card. On top of that, you can choose to exert it and make a creature unable to block, which again can just open the floodgates for your aggro deck. And you can do it more than once with the Crasher. You can easily manufacture situations with him where he can do it more than once, because you can make the one creature who could block and kill him, for example, unable to block, and then a couple turns later you can attack with him again and do the same thing. I would consider first picking On-Crop Crasher. You definitely have to be in an aggro deck to get full value out of him, but his floor is still pretty reasonable. Next, I have Deem Worthy. It's a very efficient removal spell. It's another one of those cards that does something when it cycles, so it's sort of a split card. For 5 mana, you can do 7 to a creature, kills basically everything in this format. Or you can pay 4 to do 2 damage to something and draw a card. Both modes are great. Red is the 3rd color that pushes cycling. It doesn't do it as hard as blue or black, but it does do it, and it's just a very efficient removal spell with flexibility, and there's no reason that I wouldn't want to first pick Deem Worthy. I think it's a very high quality card, but I do think there's 1 red uncommon that's even better, and I think that is Trial of Zeile. I think it's the best of the trial cycle. For 2 and a red, you do 3 damage to a creature or player. That's great. On top of that, though, if you have a cartouche or a few cartouches in your deck, you can bounce it to your hand, and that's when this gets really silly. If you can cast Trial of Zeile more than once in a game, it's going to be pretty hard to lose, because doing 3 damage to a creature, getting that value 2 for 1 at least, or even burning your opponent for 6 can easily be enough to just win you the game. Now let's move to the best green commons. I think the 3rd best green common is Quarry Hauler. 4 mana for a 4/3 is solid stats in limited. It's a card I'll play in all my green decks, just as a vanilla card, but this does more than that. When it enters the battlefield, for each kind of counter on target permanent, you get to put another counter on it or remove one from it. And that's good because it has a lot of synergy. There's brick counters in this set, but the biggest thing is probably going to be -1/-1 counters, where you can add -1/-1 counters to your opponent's creatures. There's also a few +1/+1 counters. You can add those. You can even add loyalty counters if you happen to have a Planeswalker in play. Quarry Hauler does a lot for what it is, and it's a solid common. Not one you should take super early, but the kind of common that you'd take probably as many copies of as the draft is willing to give you. The next best green common, I think, is Naga Vitalist. For 1 and a green, you get a 1/2, and it adds to your mana pool 1 mana of any type that a land you control could produce. Doesn't fix you super well. It does a little bit. It makes it so your double-costed spells are easier to cast, but the ramp it provides is important. This format looks to me like a grindy format. You have mechanics like Embalm, you have lots of activated abilities that cost mana, and these sorts of things indicate that this might even be an 18-land format to me. And Naga Vitalist is the kind of thing you want. When you have all these mana sinks everywhere and big 5, 6, 7 drop creatures who are worth playing, Naga Vitalist gets to be very, very good. And I think Naga Vitalist is worth considering taking with the first pick. However, the best green common is Cartouche of Strength. We just saw the best of the trial cycle. Here's the best of the cartouche cycle. This is a removal spell, and that's what makes it better than all of the other cartouches. So the black one can sometimes be a removal spell. Cartouche of Strength is great because it gives a creature +1/+1 and trample and has it fight something. If this were a sorcery, it would still be the best green common. for 2 and a green, if it were a sorcery that said target creature you control gets +1/+1 and trample until end of turn and fights something else, it would still be the best green common. But it's better than that. It permanently gives your creature the +1/+1 and trample, and because of that, it is a first pickable card, a very powerful card, and that's without even talking about the synergies that Cartouche of Strength has with all of the trials. So Cartouche of Strength, a great card that I would be happy to first pick. Now let's look at green's uncommons. The third best green uncommon, I think, is Shefet Monitor. I was a little underwhelmed by green's uncommons. Shefet Monitor being third should sort of indicate that. It's a fine card. It's another sort of split card. It's either a 6-mana, 6/5 creature, or it is a 4-mana spell that helps you ramp or fix. The fixing aspect of this is what really makes this come in at third for me. Green likes to be able to fix. You'd like to be able to play Cast Out off of a splash, and Shefet Monitor can enable that for you. It can search your library for your 1 planes. It can find deserts too, but that's not going to be relevant nearly as much as helping you fix. And again, a 6-mana, 6/5 is the other half of the card, and that's a big beater who can go a long way to helping you win the game. The next best green uncommon is Exemplar of Strength. This is a 2-mana 1/1, which is really bad. I don't know if I've ever had a 2-mana 1/1 come in on one of my lists here, but it's not really a 2-mana 1/1 is what makes it so good. It comes into play that way, but the next turn you attack with it, it becomes a 2/2 and you gain 1 life, and it progressively gets bigger. Now, what makes it so it's still a good uncommon even in the latter part of the game is the fact that you can actually put the counters on a different creature. So if you really need a 4/4 in play, 4/4 is better than your 1/1 or your 1/2, you can just play Exemplar of Strength and kill your other creature, and you have a 4/4 in play. So Exemplar of Strength comes with a lot of flexibility. I don't think I would first pick either of these uncommons I've mentioned so far in green, but they're perfectly solid cards that I would play in any green deck, especially if I'm trying to splash with Shefet Monitor. The best green uncommon, I think, is Crocodile of the Crossing, which for 3 and a green is a 5/4 with haste, who's similar to Exemplar of Strength, has some flexibility. You can play him as a 4-mana 4/3 with haste, but if you have another creature you don't mind putting the counter on, you just played a 4-mana 5/4 with haste, and that is something that can quickly end a game out of nowhere and really accelerate a race in your favor. And I would first pick Crocodile of the Crossing out of some packs. So that does it for my picks for the best uncommons and commons in Amonkhet. Let me know in the comments what you think are the best commons and uncommons in Amonkhet in each color. If you want to make sure you catch more of my limited content, including drafts here on the Aether Hub, don't forget to subscribe to the Aether Hub. You can also find great content from other content creators here, as you know. You can also find more limited content over on my channel, as I alluded to at the beginning of this video, including drafts there as well, and more videos about Amonkhet Limited. Thanks for watching.